Good evening, and tonight I'm going to be talking about doing an appraisal for when you're doing developments, and I think this is a very important point which you must not overlook. I did this once to my detriment not too long ago, by the way, more so because became a little bit complacent, thinking I know what I am doing, and we all fall into that trap sometimes, where you kind of become a bit comfortable, and then you soon realize becoming comfortable uh, doesn't mean you can stop following the process. Uh, but I'll talk about that some other time. But I think it's extremely important that you run through an appraisal to make sure you can figure out whether a deal works or not. Now, just because you've done an appraisal doesn't mean that the figures will work out exactly to the appraisal, because right now we're seeing there's a huge challenge in terms of trying to get uh, labor supply. So we're struggling a lot with plumbers, electricians, and some of the specialist contractors and subcontractors, but we're also struggling to find certain materials. Roof tiles have been very difficult. Timber frame has been very difficult. Bricks, we had to order a whole year in advance on one particular day. So the cost appraisal, depending on the economic climate, may not always be accurate, but it's going to give you a good indication and direction on whether or not you should do a particular deal. So I would emphasize you do this. If you don't have the experience, then you can go to someone like a quantity surveyor who can do this for you, and they'll give you the confidence. Or you can work with somebody else who has experience, like a project manager, who can point you in the right direction. So I'm going to run you through my appraisal system that I use for this particular one. I'm going to use the one that we use for our 40 house development. It's a 49 house development now. And it's a 28-page document which I've got in front of me. I have no intention whatsoever of running through you through 28 pages, but I'm just going to run you through some of the main headings so you get a good flavor and idea for how things work. Before I do that, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the comments box. More than happy to answer them as I go along, or if you want to ask questions at the end, you can do, but it's better if you ask them as you go along, because usually when I finish, so sometimes we may end up finishing the live, and then by the time you post the question, it may be too late. I do get some questions in advance. I've got one of those here today, and I'll answer that somewhere near the end. So let's get started on the appraisal. So the first thing that I do at the front of the appraisal, I've got my appraisal summary, and this basically at the top gives me my income. So the income obviously depends on, are you keeping the property, and then you work out your rental income, or are you selling. So in this particular case with the 49 houses, we are selling the properties. So what I try and do is speak to 3 local agents who have a good handle on property prices and ask them for the prices depending on the development, but I also ask them for the price per square foot. Now, not all agents are comfortable giving you the price per square foot. So if they don't, then you can go on to Rightmove and Zoopla and look at other properties in that area and how much they're selling for, and find the ones which are closely linked to or look similar to the ones you're building or converting or creating, and then work out a price per square foot, and that will give you a good indication. Then on the bottom half of the summary, I've then got the costs. So for this particular development for Bicker, we've got quite a few different costs. So I'll just quickly run you through these headings because I think you'll find them useful. So we've got enabling and abnormals, off-site and estate roads, infrastructure costs, estate landscaping, building plot costs, contingency. On this particular one, we went with 7.5%. Sometimes people go 5%. Sometimes they go 10%. Because this is a pretty sizable project, we went with 10%. Sorry, 7.5%. But usually we stick around 5%. If you're new to property or haven't done that many development deals, I'd say go with 10%. You're better over egging that number and then beating it, as opposed to going too low and then finding you got the number wrong and it's cost you more. After that, we've got our costs for consultants, which usually come in around about 10%, but obviously the bigger the deal, then the smaller that percentage is going to be. Then I've got interest costs for bank funding, the cost of the land, section 106, and section 278 agreement costs. And that then gives me my income, my costs. I then work out my return as a percentage, and generally speaking, we're aiming for 20% or more. Anything less than 20%, I'm not really interested in. Sometimes I'll do the deal if it's convenient, i.e., if it's close by to me, or if it's a particular project I'm looking to do, which I think works well, or a particular building that I like, then I might do it. But generally, it's 20% or more. Less than 20%, then I have to find reasons to convince myself for why I should do this particular project. Moving on from that, I then break down on the next page all of the house types. So for this particular development, we've got 9 different house types plus 3 different bungalows. So I'll break them down into the different number of beds, and I'll look at the price per square foot and work out how much each house type is going to earn for me, plus, or how much they're going to be worth, and then multiply that by the number of houses I've got for that house type. That then gives me the overall income for the entire development. Then I go further into all the costs that I mentioned to you on the front of the summary sheet. So here I'll run through this for you because I think this is quite important and you'll find it useful. I hope you will anyway. So for our cost here, in terms of enabling and abnormals, we've got our earth moving costs, ground costs, external costs, specialist ground treatment, and then obviously if you've got any radon, methane, that type of stuff, you can add that in there. Then we move into the section 36 costs in terms of highways, gullies, drainage, ducts. We go into that. Then we've got footpaths. Then we've got private block set. Then we've got on-site contractor costs for that particular area. Moving on from that, so I hope I'm not running through this very quickly, but I want to try and cover as much as I can for you. Feel free to ask questions, by the way. Then we've got infrastructure services. So this is the substation, water to the site, gas to the site, plot water, gas, telecoms, etc. Then we've got all of our drainage infrastructure, which is quite significant, and then any contractor costs linked with that. Then we move on to estate landscaping, which again is quite significant, and I list out every single thing. So here we've got new trees, maintained hedgerows, new box hedging, open space, the footpath, any post and rail fencing, and any further maintenance costs. Then I break it down into every single plot, and I've got renewable energy, external costs, block paving, driveways, topsoil and turf, fencing, gates. So it's very detailed. I'm not going to run through every single item for you, but it's quite detailed. Then I go into the contingency to show how that's made up and how that's broken down. Then the next costs are for my site management. So for us on this particular development, we've got construction manager, quantity surveyor, site manager, engineer, assistant site manager, and any expenses for their lodgings. Then we go into other consultants. So we've got our external project manager, external quantity surveyor, architect, principal designers, highways, energy consultants, site investigation. It goes on and on and on, including obviously our building guarantee. Then that takes me to finance costs. So I add in there my entry costs, exit costs, interest rate, and how much it's going to cost me, because obviously that is important. And then I've got my section 106 and section 38 agreements, and that pretty much then gets me to my basic appraisal. I then go one step further and run a cash flow in terms of how the cash is going to work, which is important. And if you're not good at doing this, speak to a quantity surveyor. They can help you with this. And if you speak to a good accountant who knows about property, they can do this for you too. Then the final step that I take, which is very detailed, is I break it down into all the different plot types, and I break down the cost for those plot types. So I've got the substructure, superstructure, the roof, windows and doors, and joinery, and I break down all the costs involved with that, and that adds up to quite a few different pages. So that pretty much is my appraisal. Now this is quite detailed, and I'm fortunate enough to have a quantity surveyor and a project manager who help and assist me with this and get this kind of as close to reality as can be. But if you don't, there are shorter appraisals that you can create on Excel, which will give you a good indication. If you're buying through a deal sourcer, the deal sourcer that I buy through, I usually get them to do a basic appraisal for me, just a very quick desktop, and that gives me a quick handle. So when I'm working at the numbers in my head, then I look at their desktop appraisal, And if I'm there or thereabouts, then I'll invest time going into detail to do my cost appraisal. If not, I'll say I don't want to do this deal because I don't want to waste time doing an appraisal for every single deal that comes across my table. Because otherwise, all I would be doing is running appraisals day in, day out, and that's way too much. So that, I hope, gives you a very quick whistle tour of my appraisal system, and I hope you find that useful. I'm now going to answer a question. Well, I've got about two questions here. One's more of a request where somebody's asked me to do a video, which is Anshul Raja on VAT 1614J forms. So Anshul, I will do that for you, my friend, and I shall post it on YouTube at some point in the near future. The second question is from Matt B, who says, "Hey Shaz, met you at Progressive and bought your book. Thank you, Matt, for buying the book." And he says, "When you say get all of your money back when you refinance on a deal, do you mean refinancing or do you mean bridging?" Matt, I mean when you finish the project, or in this particular case, I assume you're referring to the commercial conversions I've done. So I'm referring to when I've finished the project, my aim is to refinance, and from the value that I've added in terms of the conversion, to then pull out all of our money that we invested, and of course all the money that we borrowed to do that particular development. And so far, we've managed pretty much every single time to pull out all of our money, apart from one case where we pulled out most of our money. I think it was probably 96 or 95, 96%. We just had a very small amount left in that particular deal. But the first year's rental profits are going to cover that, and by end of the first 12 months, we'll get all of our money back. So my aim always on conversions is to get all of my money back out at the end. And that's why when I do the appraisal, I can see the end GDV. I can see all the costs in terms of the development, and of course, I've got the cost in terms of how much it costs to buy, including I include things like stamp duty, land tax, legal fees, any of the fees associated with purchase, which people miss out, which I don't think you should be missing out at all. So I put that all together, and then I work out exactly what my profit is. If I were to sell, I don't sell the commercial conversions, but the GDV allows me to work back in terms of how much I could get by way of finance on a 75% loan to value. And pretty much every time we've been there or thereabouts, and the appraisal has been pretty accurate. Now, just to kind of cover for you, two things developers are looking to make sure that they do. One is be on time, and one is to be within budget. Now, generally speaking, based on my experience and of the property developers I've worked with over the last 18, 19 years, is I've not seen one achieve both. So sometimes they come on time, sometimes they're within budget. I'm yet to see somebody who's done exactly on time and within budget. So both things are going to happen. Sometimes you may have to compromise. So you need to decide which one's more important to you, on time or within budget. And that's something that you ought to think about. Ray's asked a question, and I had a feeling, Ray, by the way, thank you for the question. Somebody was going to ask this, is, can I have a copy of your appraisal document? And I'm happy to give you an appraisal document, no problem whatsoever. I can't give you this particular one here because I don't have rights to share this with you, because I got this from my quantity surveyor, who made me promise to him I would not share this with anybody because it's very, very detailed. However, seeing that you've asked the question, I do have other appraisal documents. So if you send me a message on Facebook Messenger and make the request and just send me your email address, I will share with you a pretty detailed and decent appraisal document, which is on Microsoft Excel. You can use that to then run your own appraisals. And I'll emphasize again before I finish, it's extremely important that you run an appraisal for every single deal you do. It's going to raise your awareness. It's going to sharpen you up. It's going to get you to think about things that you may not already think about. And no matter how experienced you are, I would strongly suggest you always run an appraisal system or an appraisal through a particular system that you create for every single development that you do. Now, just before I finish, we are running a webinar on the 17th of November where I'm going to share with you how I managed to get 10.5 flats free. And the why it's 10.5 is because I did a JV with somebody, which is a no money down JV. and we created 21 flats. So he got half and I got half, and half of 21 is 10 and a half. So I got 10 and a half flats free, plus £50,000 cash when we refinanced. So we got more than our money back when we refinanced. And I created for myself just over £88,000 of rental income every year. And that £88,000 is half of the total rental income we get on those flats. So I'm going to run you through exactly how I did that on the 17th of November at 8 o'clock. And the link's up there, bit.ly /Shaz webinar. If you go on there, sign up for the webinar. I'll talk you in detail exactly how I did this no money down deal, where I ended up with 10 and a half flats for free, by the way, no cost to me, plus 50 grand in cash, plus £88,000 in rental income. So you don't want to miss that webinar. And Ray says, thank you very much. You're welcome, Ray. Send me a message and I'll send the appraisal document to you. Until next week, bye for now.